We're going to bring y'all into our huddle.
Today's Tuesday, July 9th, 2013, and you are in another episode of the NBA Huddle with me, Bram, and with me as always, my boy and producer, Scott.
Scott here.
And for the second straight time, and the fourth time overall, Justin trapped in Golden State. Taylor.
Thanks for having me back.
Our pleasure. The Warriors have been crazy active over the last few weeks, and certainly since our last podcast, gentlemen, so you know we've got big things to talk about. In fact, they have done so much, this is going to be a Warriors update only episode. In that Warriors update, we're going to break down all of the moves the Warriors have made since the end of the year, including the drafting of the European Derrick Rose, the trading for Andre Iguodala, the signing of Maurice Spates, Tony Douglas, and Jermaine, I'm probably 65-year-old, but still fairly good O'Neal, the hiring of Brian Scalabrine, and finally figuring out whether we are mourning or celebrating the fact that we didn't sign Dwight small-town diva Howard. But first, baby, a little bit of housekeeping. Now, let's get it out of the way. By some miracle, we are still, in fact, sponsored by Uber. You guys know my position on this. If you are hammered and don't have the time or the willingness to search out a cab and don't have any cash in your pocket, go ahead and use Uber. That shit is badass.
No bullshit. I used it for the first time.
Yeah.
To the Let'sGoWarriors.com launch party
How'd
on
it go for
Saturday
you?
night. It was awesome.
You rip anything off their door?
No, I didn't throw open the car. I didn't rip anything off the car. But it was awesome just to hit that button on the app and have someone sitting there waiting for me 2 minutes later. It's pretty badass.
I think it's legit. Another couple of things housekeeping-wise, first of which is fairly embarrassing. 2 weeks back, we talked about the hiring of various coaches, Brian Shaw, Lionel Hollins not yet getting hired, all the people we've seen move around, but we didn't mention Oakland legend Jason Kidd. Definitely tough for me because I'm not only an Oakland native, but a huge Cal Bear fan, so my apologies.
I wouldn't take this too hard on yourself on this one because this came out of nowhere. I just didn't discover it till about an hour ago.
You didn't even believe it when you came back from Europe and I told you that J. Kidd was the coach of the Brooklyn Nets. You seemed to be in shock.
There was such a little fanfare around this event, and it should have been a way bigger talking point.
Absolutely right. Well, our apologies to J. Kidd. J. Kidd is, just as I mentioned, the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. And in fact, here's a little excerpt from J. Kidd's first press conference as a coach. Strangely, that in fact was not J. Kidd at the press conference. He didn't grab the mic and start rapping, but it's absolutely worth playing. Can you guys think of any other head coach in any other sport who had a brief rap career?
I cannot, and that is from one of the best CDs ever, 1994. It's Best Kept B-Ball Secrets. It's unbelievable.
How many times are you going to bring up that CD?
Every time that I have a chance to.
I got one.
You got one what? A coach or
Mike
that CD?
Singletary, man. The Bears with the Super Bowl shuffle, man.
All right. Good for you. Nicely played. I don't have anybody else in there. Do you think that any of the players on the Nets actually know that J. Kidd recorded a hit rap?
Yes,
No,
absolutely.
I think that they're becoming as quite a surprise to them. Nonetheless, I was very impressed.
Great West Coast beat there.
Yeah, no, like we said when we did the worst rappers, it sounds like it ain't no fun. I mean, it's ridiculously similar. So good for you, J. Kidd.
They're probably the only team in the league that actually had guys that were old enough to remember that.
They probably bought that CD that Scott can't talk enough about. Next portion of housekeeping, a quick email from Kyle in Millbrae, who apparently was less than impressed with our best of effort. This from Kyle.
Or what?
Our best of effort last week. Quote, "Dear shitbirds, you guys doing a best of after less than 30 episodes is like putting together a highlight tape of the 2004 through 2006 Warriors." So thank you, Kyle. Nice observation, and go fuck yourself.
Well, what'd you think of my introduction?
I was going to ask you about that. Did you enjoy being on your own? Were you a little nervous? You sound a little nervous.
I think you were nervous about the job that I was going to do and how good I'd be as host.
Yeah, I was. I was very nervous. How about you? Did you feel like it went pretty well? Or?
No, I mean, I would definitely prefer not to do that role every time. Yeah. It just felt weird to record it on my own.
Was that your first take? It take you a few?
I recorded multiple takes.
It sounded like you took multiple takes. Do you still have all the other ones?
Yeah, I do.
Can you put together your worst one for us and play it next week?
Maybe it'll be a best of.
Do the best of the worst of.
If we do that, it's going to be for you, Kyle and Millbrae. Again, go fuck yourself. Finally, a quick shout out to our Australian Warrior fans. We had a chance to get to know a few of them via Twitter, most notably Cameron Day and Aussie Dubman. These fools are no joke. Very knowledgeable, very passionate. In short, they are the perfect additions both to the Warrior Nation and to the Huddle. Continue to talk shit, gentlemen. We really appreciate the support.
And another thing to point out with those guys, too, I thought all the Australian fans came along with Bogut. That's not the case. They were right there with me like, oh, yeah, if we got to trade Bogut, let's do it. And I'm like, oh, cool.
I am sure I've already told this story, but just briefly because I love it so much, I ran into a bunch of Australians when I was going to school out in Europe, one of which I became pretty close friends with. And the thing that always sticks in my mind about him is that he always called taking a shit giving birth to a New Zealander. Which, I got no problem with New Zealanders. We got one as part of Let's Go Warriors.
I just didn't know they had problems like beef like that.
I mean, whatever political beef may be there, let's just go ahead and say that's a funny thing to say. I mean, there's no question at all.
Yes, and both to people in New Zealand and Australia, their love for the game is pretty impressive. To follow the NBA when the time zone difference is that much I really respect that.
I have to figure that out. Are they like watching in the morning? Because like the Giants game last night was going till past midnight, and I'm like, if I was on the East Coast, 3:00 in the morning. When are the New Zealanders and the Australians watching? How does that?
Time zones confuse me. I have no idea. I just figured out the 3-hour difference from the East Coast, so don't ask me. Do you guys mind if we take a quick break so I can go give birth to a Stanford fan, or are you guys okay?
That was terrible.
Oh, all right. Let's talk about the Warriors because there is a lot to cover, as I mentioned. Since our last podcast, there have been an unbelievable amount of moves. Let me throw them all out on the table, and then let's discuss them one by one. Since the last podcast, they bought their way into the draft and used the 30th pick to draft Nemanja Nedovic, a 6'4", 22-year-old Serbian guard whose nickname is the European Derrick Rose. I think that is awesome, and who GM Bob Myers compared to Goran Dragic, one of the more underrated European players in the league. They also traded Richard Jefferson and Andres Biedronson's respective filthy corpses, along with Brandon Rush and 2 first-round picks, 2014 and 2017, to Utah in exchange basically for salary cap space. They got back a guard named Kevin Murphy, but I don't think he actually makes the team. They then turned around and immediately used that salary cap space to perform a sign-and-trade deal, a 3-team deal that sent Andre Iguodala to the Warriors, Randy Foye to Denver, and a second-round pick from the Warriors to Utah. And then finally, in the past 2 days, there's been another slew of signings. They signed Maurice Spates to a 3-year, $10 million deal. They signed Jermaine O'Neal to a 1-year, $2 million league minimum deal, and then they signed Tony Douglas to a 1-year deal whose details have not yet been released. How fired up are you guys?
This is amazing. Amazing. I love every one of these moves.
How on earth did we go from what we've gone through in the last 25 years to all of a sudden in a matter of 2 years? We're not talking about the talent that we have on this team. We're talking about we might have one of the best front offices in the entire league. And right now I'm thinking, if you just use this year as a sample size, I'm thinking the best.
I mean, talk about growing up quickly. I mean, I'm assuming that Jerry West has his fingerprints on all this, but however much Bob Myers was actually involved in is so impressive. This is his 2nd overall year, and to put things in context, as you started to do, Justin, look back on these past front offices. When we were under loser-ass Larry Riley, when we were under terrible St. Jean, they not only didn't have the connections or the money to make any of these moves, they didn't have any impetus. They used to sit on their hands and then panic late. Now, instead of that, we are one of, 4 teams in the running for the best free agent out there. We actually signed the 2nd best free agent out there. Not only signed him, he decided to come to us for less money. He had bigger deals on the table with both Denver and Sacramento.
That's incredible.
Unbelievable. We bought a draft pick, something that was completely unthinkable under Cohan, and we signed 3 players, Spates, O'Neal, and Douglas, who will come in and help immediately and sign them to completely manageable contracts, the same way we kind of did with Landry and Jack last year. These guys know what the hell they're doing.
Now, they gave up pretty much every draft pick they have from here on to basically 2018.
It's just 2 of them. It's just
every
2014.
Bottom of third of the first
What do you
round
mean
draft
it's
pick.
Just 2014 and 2017, right?
And
then a
2018.
second rounder. But it's a second rounder in 2018.
Yeah, but the
Correct.
Warriors have done amazing things with their second-round picks. Monte, Gilbert.
Yeah, but we also saw that this ownership group can buy second rounders like it's the thing to do. I mean, the
I
loss...
think that and we can buy into the drafts in the future. So it's not like where the draft is out of the question.
Yeah, especially when Bob Myers is playing the draft and free agency like I play franchise mode on NBA 2K.
Right.
I mean, he's just gaming the system, and he can buy a pick, he can do whatever he wants. And don't forget, when you sign guys to reasonable contracts like that, Andre Iguodala is going to remain an asset, and they're not afraid to move him. They're not married to any of these guys. If they see a deal out there that can improve the team, they're going to do it.
And we can finally look at draft picks from the new era position. Before, these draft picks were all, top 15? Probably. When we were giving up future draft picks, it meant a legitimate player. Hopefully, we're out of that now. With the team that we're not only putting together now, but perhaps what we will continue to put together, these draft picks are going to fall pretty late in the first round. They're certainly not lottery picks, and because of that, I'm not worried about giving them up. But let's keep things organized because there are more than just draft picks we've lost, and I want to make sure we get them all. Let's break them down. Let's start with the Iggy trade. Scott, what do you think?
My number one thing about this trade is chemistry. It improves our chemistry. I've always talked about chemistry being the number one thing to winning in the NBA. Iguodala and Curry are boys. It goes back to their 2010 Team USA experience. Right. And so you bring in a guy who's best buds with your number one player, that is a huge asset to the team. I go back, it reminds me of the 1989 Detroit Pistons.
Oh, my God.
And hear me out first.
I was going to give you shit about the phrase best buds, but now I'll focus on the Pistons thing. Go ahead.
So in 1988, the Pistons make it to the NBA Finals. The next year, you would think that, hey, just keep that team. You're going to go back to the finals.
I am so bored already.
What they do in the middle of the 1989 season, they trade Adrian Dantley, a guy who'd won 2 scoring titles, for Mark Aguirre. Mark Aguirre was Isaiah's best friend. They brought him in, immediate chemistry improvements. They go on to win back-to-back championships. There it is, folks. There it is, how the 1989 Pistons relate to the 2014 Golden State Warriors.
I am shocked that either your computer or your microphone didn't break with that long of a Detroit Piston take on a Warrior podcast. Damn it, Scott. No more Piston takes.
Focus on the content, please. Don't get so worked up over the fact that
I'll focus on your content then, because one of my concerns was, in fact, chemistry. They took a team that was ridiculously tight, had a great locker room. They dropped 2 of those players, basically, in Landry and Jack, because they could no longer afford them, and brought in an outsider. And do you think this improves our chemistry?
Yes, an outsider who's boys with your best player. And another thing I love about what the Warriors are doing right now is that they're not scared to make big moves to improve the team, and that's what they're doing. Last year's team, coming back this year, was not going to win a championship. They needed to do things and make these type of steady improvements.
Do you have a Detroit example to hammer that point home?
Well, let me tell you about the 1990.
How about you, man? What do you think?
Well, on the chemistry issue, it's just like a good team, it starts at the top. Well, the chemistry on this team starts at the top of the roster, which is Steph Curry. He's an easygoing guy. He lets everybody be themselves. I mean, Kent Bazemore is not Kent Bazemore if he's not allowed to be Bazemoring on the sideline. And that wasn't all Jarrett Jack and Carl Landry. So, they're role players, and we just saw how easily they're replaced, And if you're hanging up on the role players, you're never going to go anywhere.
Sure. Do you like the actual trade?
Love it. And especially when, you hear Dwight this, Dwight that, and, is it going to be a trade? Can we dump it? I mean, they dumped $25 million in salary in about an hour and a half, and you think it's all for Dwight, and then the next, I'm refreshing Twitter constantly because they're just going crazy, and all of a sudden Iguodala's on the team, and you just know he's a good team player. He's a solid defender. He's not a guy that demands the ball, which is obviously something we don't want. So how can you not like it?
I couldn't be more impressed with it. Justin kind of tipped off the first thing that really impressed me, that being the trade that freed up all the salary cap space. The idea that these guys were able to take the rotting corpses of Biedrins and Jefferson and then somehow tap them off to Utah and clear up that contract before we went into next year was so impressive to me and so out of left field that hat goes off to Bob Myers, although we've already given him enough credit. As far as the Iggy acquisition, I couldn't be happier. I think that he adds a series of things that are perfect for this team. In fact, I think he adds a series of things to this team that we didn't have before. He's a slasher and a scorer, a guy who can actually get to the rim when you need him to. That will do nothing but help complement the world-level shooting we already have from the Splash Brothers of Clay and Steph, he is an elite level perimeter defender, the type of guy who's going to complement Bogut's defense. When we really need to clamp down in the playoffs, we've got the type of players now to make those kind of adjustments. And finally, he's another ball handler. He's not a point guard, but he is a guy who feels comfortable with the ball in his hands. So in those situations, when we need someone else to bring it up, like we saw so frequently last year, we've got a guy who can take a little of the burden off of Steph. All these things are huge additions.
He's better than Jarrett Jack at that.
Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and he had the best assist-to-turnover ratio of any wing player in the NBA in the last 3 years, which cannot be said about Jarrett Jack, who was a turnover machine.
Right.
He's a guy, Jarrett Jack's a guy that he puts his head down and he goes where he's going, and he's looking for what he's looking for. Iguodala is as unselfish as they come. He's not looking for his shot, and when you got shooters like us, that's the kind of guy you need.
And you add in his attitude, the idea that he wanted to come here. It wasn't like a Corey Maggette or some of the other shitbirds we've signed who just took the money and flew with it. This guy came here because he saw an attitude, because he saw a changing of the guard, because he saw a team he knew was up and coming. Here's a quote from Andre Iguodala when they asked him why he joined the team. Quote, "I'm a big fan of Mark, big fan of the guys they've got there. The way ownership was going a few years ago, it wasn't looking too good, but the way they've turned it around real fast, and the fans in the playoffs, seeing that crowd erupt, you always want to be in a good basketball environment. They have a great locker room. Their crowd is with them every single game, especially in the playoffs. That is an awesome atmosphere." Great quote, and he gave credit to the Warrior fans, which you know I love.
Yeah.
Oh,
right there with you. You know that was the only part we picked up on, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I think it's probably really means a lot to him, the ass smashing that the Warriors gave to the Nuggets in the playoffs.
It has to, and I forgot to read one more line. I don't know why I added it. I don't give a shit about the Pistons, he says in here too. So I don't know if that was for you, Scott.
Did he say I'm not Mark Aguirre?
He did. He did include it.
I had a basketball coach who would always was pronounced Aguirre, and I'd always talk to him about Mark Aguirre. He goes, "Son, it's Aguirre."
Has anyone ever said anything to you that began with the word "son" that didn't kind of piss you off?
Oh, absolutely not. It is the most condescending way to start a sentence.
It's like the figurative equivalent of coming over and patting you on the head a couple of times before starting off a sentence. You know, it's like you'd use to speak to like a 4-year-old or something. As far as destroying Denver, I mean, you brought up the idea that he saw us take them down. This was kind of the final step in Golden State's complete obliteration of filthy fucking Denver Nuggets. First, we beat their ass in the playoffs. Then we stole their best free agent, and we fired their coach. These things are all amazing in my eyes.
Good times.
But what is this going to do to Harrison Barnes? I mean, that is the part of this that makes me most worried, because you had a guy who started every game last year, and now he just got his and played well, and then got his spot taken.
I don't see it like that. I think it's going to help Harrison Barnes. It's going to make him that much more effective every minute he's on the floor because, one, he's going to be playing against second-unit guys, and I'm assuming he's going to be the one off the bench. I do think Clay should be the starter, open up the floor for Steph and Iguodala. But with Barnes, he's going to be playing against guys who are mismatches, just like the guys he destroyed in the playoffs. He's going to get that confidence every single night, and it's only going to help his overall career.
I share your concern, Scott. That was after I stopped being giddy over the acquisition, I started kind of thinking out what the starting five is, and it does worry me. I mean, he's coming off this amazing playoffs. We kind of anointed him as our next big star. We were all really worried about even including him in a trade for Dwight Howard, and then we acquired someone who's probably going to push him to the bench. I am hoping that HB has the type of attitude and mentality where this won't bother him, but I think what this really comes down on to is Coach Jackson. You got to hope that Jackson called him before it happened, after it happened, let him know, how they're going to deal with this, why he's still the shining star as far as the development of this team is concerned. But I'd be lying to say that it didn't cause some concern.
He should look to Ginobili maybe as an example of a player who can have a huge impact as a sixth man and somebody who embraced that role and just ran with it.
For sure. And that's exactly it. He's still going to be playing 30-plus minutes a night. He's still going to be a closer. We shouldn't worry about Harrison Barnes at all. He is going to take advantage of every opportunity he's given.
We're also treating the fact that he's on the bench as a foregone conclusion. That certainly makes sense to have him come off, but we saw him starting at the power forward position in the playoffs. Perhaps it is not Barnes who hits the bench. We could even see D. Lee backing up at center. If that doesn't happen, we also have a series of other minutes that need to be distributed anyways. Now that Landry's not on the team, now that Jack's not on the team, even with the acquisitions of those other three veterans we've noticed, there's a ton of very active minutes that we're going to have to divvy up, and you got to figure a lot of those go to Harrison Barnes.
Every single piece in this lineup is interchangeable, and Barnes next to Spates at the 5, next to O'Neal at the 5, they can work every single angle, every single time down the floor.
Talk to me about these other acquisitions.
First of all, I'll start with Tony Douglas because obviously we needed to replace Jarrett Jack, and he's not a replacement for Jarrett Jack. Iguodala is more of a replacement for Jarrett Jack. But Douglas is just a hard-nosed guy. He attacks the rim, and he defends the hell out of opposing point guards, which is the most important thing for any guy on a one-year contract for, what, $2 million a year? How can you beat that?
I love Tony Douglas. I followed him more from a fantasy perspective as a guy who's been on my, always seems to make his way onto my fantasy team. But he also provides some three-point shooting. And more than anything, though, it's his defense that I think, it's cliche to say that defense wins championships, but there's a reason it's said, and I think it's true. And I think the Warriors have added some key defensive players, and Tony Douglas is one of those guys.
I like all three signings. What you kind of see with front offices who are phenomenal is that they don't just sign people based on stats. They don't just sign people based on contracts or need. They sign people based on very specific roles that they need to actually fill. This isn't a fantasy team. It's a basketball team. So what he did, that being Myers, is identify areas of weakness and then identified people who they could afford and who could help. Look at Tony Douglas. We needed a guy who could, just like you said, help bring the ball up, help take some of the burden off of Steph, help give us a little bit of perimeter D. Done in Tony. Look at Mauricio Spates. We needed someone to help provide some of the low post scoring and some of the rebounds that Landry used to get. Done. Look at Jermaine O'Neal, the exact same idea. We had a giant hole when Zealy left. We had a big concern when we traded away Biedrins because we didn't have any front court depth, and he addressed that with a very reasonable contract and a guy who can come in and contribute in those specific things right away. That's how you put together a winning team. These guys know what the hell they are doing. It leaves me as happy as I could be and as happy as I have been for, fucking 20 years.
Seriously. All those roles combined cost less than like $8 million this year.
Right.
Where most bad teams are going out and signing guys like Kyle Korver for 4 years for $25 million. Well, we could have Anthony Morrow for $1 million a year. You know, if you want shooting, he specified the roles he needed, and he went out and got the deals he wanted.
And add the other miscellaneous information. Jess and I were talking about before we went on the air that Jermaine O'Neal went out to Germany, 2-3 weeks ago, and got that super shady, blood-spinning knee procedure that Kobe's become synonymous with. As far as I'm concerned, he's probably going to come back and play like he's 25 years old. And as a random aside, fuck the Phoenix training staff. Is there any way we can get these German doctors with their dope-ass blood-spinning techniques to come be our training staff? Or
I think that might be Phoenix's training staff.
You think they're just going out to Germany and using...
I mean, what other explanation is there for Jermaine O'Neal, of all people, going to Phoenix and having the resurgence that he did? He had, for where he's at in his career and what it had been, a great season last season.
We also know that if an opposing fan is stupid enough to storm the court against the Warriors, Jermaine O'Neal will have no problem punching that dude right in his face, which, it's an intangible. I mean, you need those kind of things. You never know when terrible things are going to happen out there.
Is that a Pistons story?
No. He was playing for the Pacers, and it was, I guess, a Piston fan story.
Okay. I know how you love the
Pistons
fan.
fan getting pop story.
I was going to try to find some way to work in the words Mark Aguirre right there, son, but I couldn't come up with anything.
It's
One
Aguirre.
last little bit of Bob Myers hoovering here. He was Jermaine O'Neal's agent. He knows him very well. He knew damn well he went to Germany, and he's talked to him since he got back from Germany. He just knows. The guy is incredible. He's playing a video game, I swear.
You're completely right. How'd you feel the use of hoovering went there for you?
I guess I need to stop listening to Gary Radnich in the mornings.
I thought it went well. I just wasn't sure. I mean, you seemed a little bit nervous about it, but no,
I was trying to. I'm trying to like pull back on the F-bombs and all the swearing. I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, this is a little shot behind the scenes. I've been desperately trying to do that too, and it has been hell of hard. I hung out with my little sister, who is 12, like old enough to know swear words, but probably shouldn't be using them. Thought it'd be a great opportunity for me to start working. Like, you're swearing too much, man, cut it down. I think I dropped like 18 F-bombs within the first paragraph. So it's something I also need to work on. Thank you for pointing that out. I really
and if there's any
that.
awkward pauses on my end, just know I'm trying to think of an actual word that normal people use.
I don't think hoovering's it, but maybe you'll step onto it.
Like I said, no more Gary Radnich for me.
Warriors have definitely upped their tattoo count this offseason. We have really, really taken it to a new level.
Do you think Steph ever gets a tat?
He's got one.
Where? I don't know.
Oh, he put it on. He had one that he just got after the season for one, but someone told me he had another one. There's little tiny ones. I don't quite think it's a butterfly on the ankle, but it's nothing significant.
There's no Spates. I mean, that guy has got some tattoos.
Thank God you didn't say he has one like on the small of his back or something weird that you knew about. Oh, on his left ass cheek.
Or
It's amazing.
A sun shining on his navel.
On his belly button, a la Reggie Miller. Next move I'd love your guys' opinion on, because at first I laughed, but now I think I kind of like it. Brian Scalabrine. They signed him to be an assistant coach. He is synonymous now with the human victory cigar. When he was playing for Boston, the Boston fans loved the idea that if he hit the court, it was like a victory cigar because he won, so he became kind of a joke out there. But truth be told, this guy's got a lot of championship experience.
Hey, he's the white mamba for a reason, man.
I mean, we were talking, right? 4 championships. He played actively in 2 of them while he was still a live player at New Jersey, and then sat the bench for another 2 in Boston. So you got to figure he picked up a lot from those coaches, respectively. What's that? Lawrence Frank and Doc Rivers. Huh?
Yeah, he was the original Matt Bonner, right?
Yeah, right.
Red Rocket?
Yeah, he didn't have as cool of a nickname as Red Rocket. I saw recently, and I have no idea where the hell this came from, but while he was still the Human Victory cigar, a radio station came out in Boston and allowed 4 or 5 listeners to play Scalabrine one-on-one with the idea that this guy wasn't that good. He's just sitting on the bench not doing shit. They videotaped it, and I'm proud to report, since he's now a Warrior, Scalabrine beat the shit out of all of those guys. It's just another reminder. Look, these guys might be sitting on the bench. They might look like losers compared to the greatest athletes on earth, but they are all so much better than anything we can ever hope to do. Like these highlights, they had like this 16-year-old pimple-necked geek trying to guard, Scalabrine, shitting all over him, and of course he's better than them.
Yeah, that's a preposterous contest. That's ridiculous. Scalabrine is going to crush anyone else. I don't know about his coaching acumen, but his playing abilities is definitely going to be above
He's
the
also
average.
helped add to the all Huddle ugly team. We might have to consider next year's version. Scalabrine is right on the edge, and I don't like saying this, but Andre Iguodala has a very strangely puffy face.
I listened to the best of over the weekend, and neither one of these guys get a spot on that team.
Yeah.
That's fair. Do you like Scalabrine, man?
Yeah, and I was actually, it made me think that a couple weeks ago, Bob Myers was talking about how big the Warriors are on analytics and more video game talk, but they're big on numbers, and what good are doing is mining all that data if it never gets to the coach. And after hearing him say that they were going to put an analytics assistant on the bench, it just makes me think that he's that guy.
I don't know why this reminded me of this. I should have mentioned it way at the top of the show, but the whole Jason Kidd thing, let me rewind it back to where we were. How pissed off was Patrick Ewing when he found out about this signing? Pat Ewing has been pining for a head coach position for what, like 20 years, it seems like?
Patrick Ewing, Lionel Hollins, George Karl.
But I mean, like those other guys, okay. But apparently Brooklyn went out.
What do you mean, okay?
Well, Brooklyn went out. They wanted to go in a new direction, like, I guess. They wanted to get some kind of former player, I guess. Pat Ewing has been an assistant coach. He's been gone forever. He's been desperately trying to get this opportunity. Jason Kidd was retired for 18 seconds and was immediately a head coach. There's no way this guy isn't super angry and super resentful. And to put 2 points together, Scott, I still have to give you shit. How did Patrick Ewing not make your all Huddle ugly list?
It's very easy. I don't think
How can
he's
you say
that
that?
ugly.
He's not uglier than Popeye Jones, I can tell you that
No,
much.
but Popeye Jones is the power forward. I mean, at least he deserved to be on.
Or Chris Kaman, then.
No, okay, he's definitely not uglier than Chris Kaman. There is nobody on earth who is uglier than Chris Kaman. Dwight Howard, quickly. You guys pissed off we didn't get him?
It was fun to follow the whole thing, and of course, outright signing, love it. Sign and trade for our dead money, still love it. Sign and trade for Bogut and Barnes, now you're getting into troubled waters. But, as soon as we changed course and went Iguodala, it was like, Dwight who?
Yeah.
Yeah, same. I would have loved to have had him, and I love that the Warriors were in the discussion for him. I think that says a lot about where they are as a franchise. But I'm over it. I'm moved on, and I think that the Iggy deal just has me focusing on that now. Who cares about Dwight?
Scotty and I talked about the possibility of trading for Dwight Howard, 3 or 4 weeks ago. My thoughts on this have not changed at all. If this was the 2009 Dwight Howard, I'd give up anything they wanted. I would have included Clay or Barnes, maybe even both of them.
No doubt.
You don't get an opportunity at that type of a force of nature at a position that no longer exists. Fact being, this is not 2009 Dwight Howard. He is, one, super immature, two, possibly hurt. Let's take those in turn. Super immature, I don't give a shit about. If Justin Bieber was a 7-foot monster, I'd give him as much money as he wanted to come play for us. But the injury concerns me, more specifically where it is. This guy's got an L4-5 back injury. Those things you don't know about until 2, 3, 4 years down the line. The fact that he was able to play this year, that's great. What we don't know is what happens with that injury, in 2015, 2016, 2017. If it was anything less than a max contract, I'm going to roll those dice. Let's find out. But you don't want to put that much money in this guy's pocket if he's not playing in 4 or 5 years.
And you mentioned those question marks right there. Obviously, we have question marks in Andrew Bogut, but what if those questions go in our favor? We can re-sign him next year at 2/3 of the price it costs for Dwight Howard. And let's not forget the biggest bonus of this whole Dwight Howard thing. The Lakers are going to suck.
Yep.
And Laker fans, whether or not they want to admit it now, finally learning that LA is no longer LA. How many Laker fans in your life told you, of course he's signing here, everybody wants to play here, we're never going down because Los Angeles is always going to be the mecca for free agents? Well, memo to you, Laker fans, it turns out that was complete bullshit. Go ahead and enjoy possibly one of the worst teams in the NBA next year.
Guess what? If a guy's going to take a pay cut to play for a good team, it's going to be in the Bay Area, assholes.
Apparently. And how fun is it going to be watching them throw everything they have at LeBron James next year just to end up with not LeBron James?
I can't wait.
Any other moves you guys hoping for, expecting, or do you think the Warriors are wrapped up and already preparing for training camp?
Well, the one that we haven't talked about completely is Nedovic.
Yeah.
And he's still under contract with his team over in Europe, so they're in talks right now to buy him out.
It sounds like they're bringing him in this year, yeah?
Yeah, it sounds like that's going to happen. So I know nothing at all about him other than what you said at the start of the show.
Do you need to know anything more than he's the European Derrick Rose? I mean, what better nickname could you possibly have?
Who came up with that nickname? That's just something you read.
Some European.
Him, probably, but who cares? It's still fantastic. And he already has more heart than the real Derrick Rose, from what I can tell. So it is on.
I don't. Shot to Derrick Rose, uncalled for.
The guy didn't play during the playoffs, and he was cleared to play. I'm not allowed to take a little hard shot at that?
That was a smart move by Derrick Rose.
He's got some impressive YouTube clips, if that makes
Have
a
you
great
checked him
player.
out?
Oh,
Well,
come
so
on.
does Scott.
As soon as we were done playing NBA franchise mode on draft night, I was all over it, and we had 3 different draft picks. So I was watching YouTube clips of 3 different guys and hoping that one of them was going to be here one day.
Was he playing in the 3-on-3 Roma tournament during those clips?
The way he was dunking on people, it looked like it could have been one of those. It didn't look like anybody played any defense in any of those games. It was like an and-one highlight.
Did it look like the legendarily shady referees from Naples were involved, or no?
I know that Scott would have taken him, but I think he's going to do good for us when he actually comes over to the States.
I like his acquisition, and I especially like it now that we picked up Tony Douglas. Before, it seemed much more of a roll of the dice. Who knows what we're getting with this guy? A lot of times Europeans don't immediately translate, but now it's just bonus. If he's shitty, who cares? Put him in the D League. We got a guy we know we can work with. If he's not and can play, phenomenal. He's on a rookie contract. We got him for 3 years, and he's tough. I mean, if he's been playing in Europe, these guys are, generally speaking, no joke. In fact, what was the name of the guy who hurt Russell Westbrook and who we also hated, the Houston Rockets?
Patrick Beverley.
Patrick Beverley. I heard a quote from him. They said, the next playoff game where he was playing in Oklahoma City after he had hurt Russell Westbrook, the Thunder fans were understandably giving him nonstop shit. I mean, booing, hating, everything. They asked him about it afterwards. He goes, look, that's nothing. So I used to play in Europe. They used to throw batteries at me when I was at the free throw line. So these guys who are coming up through Europe, that they're mentally tough and will be able to immediately contribute. I'm hoping that's true for this guy too. As far as extra moves, I got one suggestion, and honestly, I haven't looked at the contract thing. The only thing I think we haven't completely addressed, with all due respect to Maurice Spades, is a back-to-the-basket score. Landry really was our only post score, and losing him, I'm afraid that we're going to come up a little bit short on that area. Now, one of the solutions is Bogut gets healthier, and he kind of finds some of the offensive magic he used to have as a Milwaukee Buck. Maybe we get that. I wouldn't mind if they could actually bring another guy in. And the person I suggest, although again, I don't know if contracts work, Chris Humphries. I don't give a shit about why people hate him around the league, whatever Kardashian reference that means, but he is a tough guy, a guy who can come in off the bench and a person who can score down low fairly easily, and you got to figure he's expendable now because the Nets no longer need nor want him given the KG acquisition.
Are you thinking a trade exception goes for him or something like that?
That's what I would hope for, but I don't remember what his contract is. He might be out of our reach as far as money is concerned, and then it is what it is.
And he wasn't involved in the KG
He
Pierce
was.
deal?
He was.
Oh, I'm sorry. He was. So he's on Boston now.
He's in Boston now,
Same
yeah.
idea. I mean, Boston doesn't
Yeah.
want his ass either. They're trying to
they
lose
can't
as many
tank hard
games.
enough
Yeah,
this year.
exactly right. So you got to figure he's available. But that's just one name I'd like. In Bob Myers, we trust at this stage. Anybody he's looking at, but I think that's the one hole.
Anybody who's speaking out against Bob Myers, they just need to go somewhere. They can rear their ugly head when we start losing, but until then, everything has been home run after home run after home run.
We have beat this drum so many times since the end of the playoffs, and I will proudly beat it again. It is so amazing to be a Warrior fan during this era. It justifies all the darkness we've gone through. We are staring at the light, and one of the main reasons for that amazing switch is Bob Myers and the rest of that front office. So congratulations to you. Huge fun kicking at you guys. So great hanging with you every week. This week was absolutely no exception. Please remember that you can find us on Twitter at NBA Huddle. You can find us on Gmail, nbahuddle@gmail.com. Our websites remain letsgowarriors.com and nbahuddle.com, and we're also found on iTunes. Please, if you get a shot, go on there and drop a review. Not if you're the type of asshole who's going to give us 1 star, but if you're down to get on there and give us 5, we'd really appreciate it. Justin, where can we find you, buddy?
Well, first of all, I've given you guys 5 stars from like 6 different accounts.
You are the man.
But you can find Trapped in Golden State on Facebook, on Twitter, trappedinggoldenstate.com. Give me a shout out.
Yeah, and for the record, we do not give a fuck about disingenuous 5 stars. Create as many accounts as you can. Drop the 5 stars on there. Even if you hate us, we would appreciate it. Let me give you a quote, a quote to get us the hell out of here. Unfortunately, we're leaving basketball and going to baseball, but I got 2 from one of my favorite quote-giving baseball players, Mr. John Kruk. 1, he was once asked why he was smoking a cigarette out while playing first base. This lady came up and said, "You're an athlete, you shouldn't be smoking." He said, "I'm not an athlete, lady. I'm a professional baseball player." 2, he was also asked how he felt at the end of the game after striking out, and he said, like they say, it ain't over till the fat guy swings. Huge fun. We'll see you guys next week.
Things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I want money. That's what